Hey you buddies, Mr. Pugly here, coming at you with another Wonderlands build. Today I want to show you my Stabbomancer Spore Warden build that is able to clear the raid bosses very easily. As you saw at the beginning of the clip, I decided to make some clips without using the liquid cooling. Now as you guys know, my last two builds used the liquid cooling for the showcase of the raid boss, which I felt to be a little bit boring if I kept showing speed kills with just the liquid cooling and just to show the power of these builds. I did want to show you that it is able to kill these bosses easily without, at the current moment, one of the best guns in the entire game. So instead I used an SMG, a purple SMG nonetheless, a chaotic cryo nightshade. So keep that in mind. The speed kills that you saw could have been even quicker by using the liquid cooling, but I did want to show you that it's able to do that even without a liquid cooling. This build is all about running really fast and dealing as much damage as possible. Stabbomancer specializes into very heavily. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch on the top right. I've been streaming 5+ hours every single day on Wonderlands content, so if you're looking for Wonderland Twitch content, make sure to follow me up there. And let's get into the video.
Legendary? Whoa! No way, dude!
As always, let's first start off with the skill tree. Now, Spore Warden probably doesn't need much introduction. If you've been following the channel, my recent builds, you know that Spore Warden tree looks very similar to my last couple builds, but I will briefly explain it after we go over the Stabbomancer tree. First things first, we are using From the Shadow to allow us to go invisible and thus allow us to deal automatic crits every single time we deal damage. These are reduced damage crits, but we have enough strength and crit hit multipliers on our build to allow us to mitigate this reduction in damage. We're using From the Shadows as our primary burst window to deal as much damage as possible, but let's actually go into the tree. So first things first, I want to capitalize on Swift Death. Now Swift Death is what makes this build run so well, because the faster we move, the more damage we deal. So basically, maxing out Swift Death means that if you're going for a build that moves really quickly, Swift Death will allow you to deal more damage while you move quickly. On top of that, Haste allows us to get faster movement speed and allows us to double that whenever we cast a spell. So baseline, we get 12% more movement speed and 12% more melee attack speed. But when we cast our spell, aka their Buffmeister, we're going to swing at 24% extra speed and move 24% faster. We have 4 points in Arsenal just to get more damage across the board, so that's 12% gun damage, spells, and melee. We're using Exploit the Weakness, which is another debuff. If you guys are familiar, Spore Warden is the king of debuffs with Wrath of Nature, but Exploit the Weaknesses is a very useful debuff tool as well, because we're most of the time always able to deal 2 status effects at all times with this build. Any enemy we hit will get a debuff of 12% more damage on top of everything else we have on the build, which is very good for just extra damage. I did not go with potent poisons because I did not feel like we needed to optimize our dots, aka our damage over time effect, because of the fact that we were killing people so quickly that the dots didn't really even get a chance to kill anybody. Our armor set is giving us 2 points into follow-up, but I don't care for this point on this particular skill tree. It's not a bad point, but it's mainly used for melee or a mix of melee and guns, and I don't necessarily need it, but our armor set is giving us it. Now, I did not go for Nimble Fingers, not because it's a bad skill. I actually think it's a really good skill, but we're not meleeing that often in most situations. I didn't feel like we needed it, and then thus we could put the points elsewhere to increase our total damage. Similarly to Follow Step, once again for melee stuff, so I didn't get a point into there, but we get 2 points into Sneak Attack, which increases our total critical hit damage, which is very nice, especially since we're dealing critical hits all the time, not only from our base crit chance, but from the Shadows action skill, which is very good. If I could have put more points into here, I totally would have, but instead I put 1 point into Elusiveness. Elusiveness allows us to have some extra survivability. What this skill essentially does is the faster we move, the higher chance we get to evade all damage. That is very useful, but the important part is allowing us to sprint and shoot at the same time, allowing us to have maximum speed without doing any awkward bunny hops, thus allowing our damage from Swift Death to still be all the way up there. I'm going to briefly go through the Spore Warden tree because you're probably tired of me telling you how good this tree is, but got 5 points in the Eagle Eye, 5 points to Affinity to increase our play the angles, 4 points in the Bullseye mainly as filler, but it is nice to get more critical hit chance. We got the Pet Revive skill, we got Wind Runner to allow us to run faster, which is very, very crucial for Swift Death, and Fire Faster, which is nice for DPS. Our armor set gives us 2 points in there, allowing us to move even quicker. Ideally, I would like more points into this point from our armor set, but 2 points is nothing to scoff at because the maximum you can get from it is 3, so that's pretty good. As well as the extra fire rate from the armor set, giving us 2 additional points from Wind Runner feels really, really good on this build. 3 points in the Quiver Holding, mainly as filler, but it is nice utility to fire longer and have some ammo regeneration. The bread and butter of the Spore Warden, of course, Wrath of Nature, which we proc every single time we proc Play the Angles, which is very, very often since we are critting all the time due to our From the Shadows, as well as getting Headhunter to allow us to deal more damage whenever we do hit the crit spot. And as I said previously, I'm using Play the Angles to allow us to deal more damage and proc Wrath of Nature. Of course, whenever we go into our From the Shadow ability, this ability goes basically ham and just ricochets all over the place, and it's very, very fun to be able to finally optimize Play the Angles to deal really, really good damage, because it does really, really good damage when you can get a bunch of bullets to proc the effect constantly due to From the Shadows, because normally it's a hit or miss skill. It sometimes does good damage, sometimes does bad. Still, that is the case, but we can get that sometimes good damage more often, thus allowing us to deal some crazy damage out of nowhere sometimes. Our hero points is maxed out into Strength, maxed out Wisdom, and a little bit into Attunement. Maxed out Strength, of course, to increase our critical hit damage, or Wisdom to apply more status effect damage when we do apply those dots, because the dots do deal a lot of damage in Wonderlands, so I feel like it's usually important to max out Wisdom, and Attunement to get our From the Shadows quicker. If you really, really wanted to, you could put the Attunement into Dexterity to get more of a base critical hit chance, but I didn't feel like Dexterity was that worth it, especially since we're getting From the Shadows very, very quickly due to our setup. Due to us running really, really quickly with this build, we want items that allow us to beam the enemy very, very easily, no matter the distance, or just allowing us to deal lots and lots of damage when we get up close and personal and start shooting. So of course, I'm using the Liquid Cooling. It's one of those guns that act like a regular gun, and the bullets travel really, really quickly and with pretty high accuracy. Despite it only say 50%, I normally have no problem when firing this weapon with accuracy personally. This gun, like the other builds, does crazy amounts of damage. But as we go through the video, I will only showcase it a handful of times because I want to still capitalize on the other weapons here. The Ruby Spite is especially deadly on this particular build because the Ruby Spite allows us to deal large amounts of damage while still running really fast, because it basically homes in on the enemy after you get a kill for upwards to 6 whole seconds, which is very, very deadly, as I'll show in a few moments. We're also using the Nightshade to deal the bulk of our damage on this build. We have lots of SMG critical hit bonuses on our loadout here, so the Nightshade really shines on this particular build. Next, we have the Goblin Pickaxe. I did say earlier that I might be using a peg leg on this build to allow us to get more movement speed, but I realized the Goblin Pickaxe gives us 30% movement speed, which is the same amount as the peg leg, as well as giving us spell cooldown rate and action skill cooldown rate to get our spell and action skill back quicker, which allows us to proc our enchantments more, and thus allowing us to get a shorter delay between our burst windows when we actually activate those. Goblin Pickaxe might be one of those items that you see in a lot of builds because it just has amazing utility that is just really, really incredible. It's especially incredible on this one because the extra movement speed does equate to more damage on this build, so it is very crucial to have this. Next, we have a random purple ring that gives us gun damage and SMG critical hit damage, as well as action skill cooldown to allow us to get our From the Shadows quicker. This allows us to really capitalize on our Nightshade, but whenever we do switch to the other 2 pistols on our loadout, I do like to swap over to the class ring, which gives us pistol critical hit chance. The other 2 secondary stats don't matter too much, but it still has 17.1% gun damage, as well as increasing all these bonuses by 50% when our action skill is gone, which is very, very nice to minimize the damage reduction from our burst windows. Similarly, I'm also using a class ring right here to increase our SMG damage, gun damage by 17.1, and allowing our From the Shadows to last a little bit longer with action skill duration. And once again, when our From the Shadows are gone, we get an additional 50% on all these stats. Next, this might be one of the most important things to have on your build. Now, A smart armor has a special effect. Total critical hit chance is reduced by 50%. We don't care about that because we are using From the Shadows, which means we're going to crit no matter what. But instead, we're going to get a 50% increase on critical hit damage, which is insane. That is a huge increase. That is very, very good, especially for our build. So this is an essential armor piece to have on this build to deal the most amount of damage. The one thing I don't have on this armor piece is good secondary stats, except for the movement speed. The movement speed does help us to deal more damage as we move quicker because of Swift Def, and I would like another point into Rin Runner or more points into Swift Def. I don't care about follow-up, but I couldn't find any of these without follow-up, which is a bit unfortunate, but I know it exists out there because I've seen it drop on a purple. So make sure to get this armor ASAP. Next, of course, we're using a Body Ruin. The Body Ruin I use is while action skill active, increase our frost damage by 50%, as well as using another Body Ruin for dark magic when I do switch over to my dark magic pistol to optimize the dark magic damage of our pistol. And for bossing, I primarily like to use the Cursed Wit to increase our total damage by 100% when our shield is depleted, which is very, very often during boss fights. And I'm just now realizing I didn't go over the enchantments I had besides the shields. So melee one gives action skill start increased gun damage by 40%, which is very, very good because we're activating our action skill very, very often. We have action skill start on all of our primary weapons here. I feel action skill start increased damage dealt by 20% for 20 whole seconds is an extreme boost to your total damage since we're activating your action skill very, very often. So these are very, very crucial on this build. That's why I have it on every single one here. Of course, you could have action skill active increase all elements or a specific element, but I kind of cover that with the other items in our loadout, as well as having an enchantment when spell cast increase our gun damage by 30% on our Buffmeister. Speaking of the Buffmeister, we are still rocking a Frost Buffmeister because our amulet does increase our total frost damage, so this really just helps us deal more damage overall. But I also have a Buffmeister for dark magic damage if I ever want to optimize the dark magic damage with my dark magic pistol. And once again, I'm using a Sacrificial Skeep, which allows us to increase our total frost damage since our best two weapons are frost damage weapons by 30%. Increasing Spore Warden's power allows our Play the Angles to deal more damage, which is very, very good since we're proccing it constantly with From the Shadows, and the secondary stats don't matter too much. But the important part of the Sacrificial Skeep is whenever we get below 50% HP, we have a Sacrificial Skeep that instantly heals us all the way to max for 10 whole seconds. And these healing bursts that comes from the Skeep proc with intervals of 2 seconds from what I've seen, which allows you to basically health gate indefinitely for the full 10 seconds, which essentially means that you can literally not get brought down by enemy fire for those whole 10 seconds as long as you have the Sacrificial Skeep healing you, which is insane. Nevertheless, let's actually go into a Chaos dungeon so you can actually see this build in action besides the raid boss footage I showed you at first. So I'm going to be using my Cryo Nightshade, but I will show my liquid cooling and other pistol in a few moments. So the name of the game is to essentially go into your From the Shadows, activate your Buffmeister, try to deal as much damage as possible like that, and everything around will also take a ton of damage because Play the Angles will ricochet these bullets to nearby enemies, allowing you to deal tons and tons of damage really, really easily if the RNG is on your side, because Play the Angles is still technically only a chance to ricochet bullets. But since you're shooting so many bullets with the Cryo Nightshade, since it shoots 4 bullets every single time you shoot it, you're going to see this proc almost constantly. Even when From the Shadows isn't up, I'm still able to deal lots and lots of damage because our speed allows us to deal exponentially more damage than you would see when you're just standing still. So the name of the game, once again, is to run really fast, deal lots of damage like that, and just get in their faces so you can get these bullets guaranteed to hit. Now, if I swap over to my liquid cooling, I have a lot easier time because I can still run and shoot, but since it doesn't have any bullet traveling, these bullets instantly hit the target, allowing me to run and gun without having to get right directly into their face. Now, since I showed my 2 cryo weapons, let me swap over to my dark magic pistol here. I'm going to thus also swap over to my action skill active dark magic damage from our Body Ruin, allowing us to deal extra damage with our Body Ruin, which allows us to deal extra damage when we go into From the Shadows. And I forgot to even say, the Body Ruin we have allows us to get 20% more fire damage whenever you get a kill, which is an extremely good kill skill to have. It just increases your damage by so much. This is such an important ward to have on your build it is just a free damage increase. Also, the healing of 50% of your maximum HP is super nice, but the important part is the bonus 20% fire damage. This essentially allows us to stack exploit your weaknesses on the enemy twice as opposed to just once with our elemental guns, allowing us to deal 12% more total damage to those enemies. Now, earlier I said Ruby's Spite is one of my more favorite guns on this build because of its utility use with our movement speed effects, but when you first use it, you might notice the damage isn't too great. But as soon as you get a kill, the fire rate is going to start increasing rapidly, and thus allowing you to make all of these bullets instantly travel to whoever target it seeks. So it's going to have a huge homing property, which thus allows you to run as fast as possible, dealing tons of damage. This damage gets even higher when you go into From the Shadows, and then any enemy you see will just get lasered just like that, very easily. So once you activate From the Shadows and Buffmeister with this and the homing bullets, you're just going to see all the enemies just die very quickly. We just saw those 4 enemies just died immediately, and because of its homing property, you can kind of just keep running and shooting around the map, and these bullets, if there is any enemies left after you kill all of them, they will start homing in onto any enemy you see, even if it's really far away from the map. So that's why I like this gun so much. The unfortunate part about the gun is that if you were to actually kill the enemy with the dot or something else, it does not get the insane fire rate and homing buff. It will have to be only triggered when you hit the enemy with the bullet and get the finishing blow that way, which is very inconvenient. I think it should activate every single time you get a kill with the build, but that just isn't the case, making it kind of awkward to use sometimes. As you see right here, I'm just going to stand in the circle and I'm going to clear out all the enemies that spawn, even if they're super far away, because we're going to see the bullets home very easily, thus allowing them to kill any enemy even if I don't see them. Like around that corner, I'm now killing that enemy, he's dead. There's an enemy up there, apparently I didn't even see it spawn, but my bullets were able to travel all the way up there and just deal tons of damage. Even with tankier foes like this, even if I don't have the buff active, if I activate my Buffmeister, we're going to see a decent chunk of damage come out of them. But as I said, the damage does really shine when you actually have the kill skill active with the gun's innate ability. And I'm going to switch back to my Cryo Nightshade, and we're going to go through one more encounter just so you can see the damage of the Nightshade itself, since everyone's probably already aware of how much damage the actual liquid cooling can do. Okay, we have one of these encounters, which is a great encounter to see the play the angles go burr. So I'm going to hit all these enemies. You'll see occasionally these enemies will just be frozen even if you didn't hit them, just because play the angles sent all those bullets around the enemies, just allowing them to basically get the debuff and huge amounts of damage on them, which is very fun. Even badasses that spawn or even cryo resistant enemies don't stand a chance, which is very fun to see. We do have the boss spawn now, so I'm just going to activate my From the Shadows and everything, and the boss was immediately killed despite me hitting the badass troll right next to it. The troll wasn't the boss, it was an enemy by the name of Oculus, which means From the Shadow basically sent all those bullets from that badass troll into that boss, just killing him instantly, which is insane. This build really does capitalize on From the Shadows to an extent that allows you to finally use it to deal tons and tons of damage, which is super fun to see nearby enemies die. It's like Chais that bind Amara. It's so fun. Or I suppose it's more like Fade Away Flak, but you'd have to use the Jacobs to do that. You don't necessarily need to do that in this one. Now this build is one of the more fun builds I've played because you just run super fast, especially when you activate your spell, or if you get your Windrunners to proc, you just are able to move so quickly with this build and deal so much damage. It's like playing the Flash if he had a gun. It's so dumb. I love it so much. It's a blast to play. I would love you guys to try it if you're a Stabbomancer main, or if you have a Spore Warden. It is definitely very fun to play around with. And as always, a big shout out to the members who make these videos possible. We have Jace Noodles, Clairvoyance, Rick and Glacia, Super Noob, Josh Dig, 31bar70, and Doorman Tazzies. These are the people who support me as little as $5 a month, and you can also support me as little as $5 a month by clicking the link in the comment description or in the top right to become a member. The more members we have, the closer I get to becoming full-time, which means more videos for you guys. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him out with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on the wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.